How's everybody doing? So I realize I'm standing between you and lunch, and I actually have a countdown timer. It's going to help me make sure that I don't keep you too much from lunch. And so we begin. Thanks for the introduction. So again, I am the recruiting and talent and innovation guy at NPR. I want to quickly gauge the room. So how many of you are in recruiting or talent acquisition functions? My people. All right. All right, how many of you are currently using social media to recruit? Okay, keep your hands up. Keep them up. How many of you are using LinkedIn? Actually, take them down. We'll switch it up. How many of you are using LinkedIn to recruit? Okay, the whole room. Okay. How many of you are using Facebook to recruit? A little bit less. How many of you are using Twitter? Solid. How many of you are using Pinterest? That was kind of a joke. Really? Are you using? I'd love to hear how that's working out for you. My good friend Craig Fisher will recruit off any platform there is, and he sees value in Pinterest. I see branding value in Pinterest, but if you're actually recruiting people and hiring people, I'd love to hear some of those stories. So as far as the session today, we're really going to kind of cut it into two sections. The first section is going to talk a little bit about the state of social media and recruiting. The second section is really going to talk about our journey at NPR. So how many of you are familiar with National Public Radio? Okay, cool. So for those of you that aren't, you'll get a sense, hopefully at the end of the session, kind of what we're all about. And I think more importantly, what I really want you to be able to take away from this session is some actionable steps that you can take to start to implement or scale your social media recruiting efforts in your organization. Now, what I'm about to walk you through is our journey. And like every expert or every person that you're going to hear today or any conference you go to, you need to understand that especially when you're listening and hearing about case studies, you're hearing about what they did. And what they did is unique to their organization. And what I'm going to walk you through is unique to NPR. It's not intended to be a turnkey playbook that you can take and replicate all of these things at your organization. But hopefully what it can do is be a spark of an idea or inspiration that you can take and understanding the DNA of your own organization, figure out how you can make that work. So, why social? We're going to be spending some time today really talking about why social is so important for us in the recruiting and talent acquisition space. And before we get into social that's specific to recruiting, I want to just take a moment and share a video that's really specific about social media today. And really, you know, if you have any bosses, coworkers, friends, family that are telling you social media is a fad, please laugh at them. Point and laugh, because it's not a fad, it's not going anywhere. We're really just beginning to explore how social media is going to completely revolutionize business and how it will continue to do that. So this video will actually give you some perspective on how that's shaping up. right, so as you can see, social media has already made a profound impact on the world that we live in. That actually slide and inspiring music comes from Eric Qualman. So Eric Qualman is a leading kind of social media thought leader. He's on Twitter at eQualman, or Equalman, if you want to look at it that way. But a really sharp guy. Definitely recommend his book, especially if you're early in the stages of getting into social media. It really is insightful in terms of helping you understand how social media is reaching masses and really how it's transforming the way that people engage with products, marketing, brands, and the branding piece certainly ties into what we do in recruiting. So what is social recruiting? We talked about social media. What is social recruiting? When I look at social recruiting and social media in recruitment, I bucket it into a couple categories. There certainly are more than these, but social sourcing, how are we finding talent using social media? Employment branding, a big part of what we'll be talking about today is employment branding. How are we using social media to amplify our brand messaging? Recruitment marketing, sharing our jobs, not just posting them to a career site and really hoping people go there, but finding ways to actively get them out in the marketplace. And even talent networks, which are a valuable tool, and you can build talent networks around hashtags. So there's a variety of things that you can do here. If you look at the state of social recruiting, so these stats are from a JobVite survey in 2012, 92% of US companies have used social media to recruit and hire. LinkedIn is factored into that, so that's probably no surprise. You can see the breakdown on the bullet on the right in terms of the platforms that people are using. So LinkedIn, far and away the leader, as it should be. It's a big social job board thing that I think recruiters rely on heavily. Facebook coming up next, Twitter next, and blogs. Google Plus is on there. I think there's a lot of potential in Google Plus, but it's still an emerging platform. And YouTube as well. Looking at employer branding, so this is now how are we using social media to tell our story, and why are we doing that? We want our brands to attract talent. When you have a strong employer brand and you draw talent to your organization, it impacts a variety of aspects of recruiting and really makes more people come to you. It shortens time to hire. It helps you build passive pipelines of talent, cost per hire, all those metrics that we get hung up on sometimes. A strong employer brand impacts all of those things. So where do you start? You're thinking, okay, I get it, Lars. Social media is good. I need to use it. Where do I start? I think this cartoon kind of illustrates the starting point that a lot of people face. We're going digital. What are we doing? Oh, I'm going to spit out a bunch of names of platforms. What are we going to do? Well, I don't know. We'll figure it out when we get there. And that's not a strategy. It's not a strategy to have real estate on a social media platform. You have to be intentional about it. You have to understand what it is you're really looking to accomplish, and how will that platform help you accomplish that. And when it comes to figuring out what platform is right for you, it's a pretty simple world out there, right? There's not too much to consider. This slide is definitely outdated, and this slide's probably 6 months old. And that's really the pace of change within the social media landscape. Don't look at this and get intimidated. If somebody, if you have a boss or somebody's telling you, what, we need to be doing social recruiting, so I expect a Twitter, Facebook, Google+, and YouTube page by Monday. Tell them they've got it wrong. You don't need to be everywhere. What you need to do, especially if you're new to social media, figure out what platform is going to figure out what your objectives are. What are your needs as an organization? What talent challenges are you trying to solve? Then figure out what platform is going to be best suited to help you do that. Start small, scale. If you try to spend your time launching all these platforms at the same time, especially if you're new to them, they're probably going to suck. And if they suck, they're actually going to do more damage than good, because people aren't going to have a good experience interacting with you through social media. So resist the urge to be everywhere at once. So I want to shift a little bit and talk to you a little bit about how we're using social media at NPR. And I guess to tell that story, I'll back into how and where I arrived at NPR. So I joined NPR about 2.5 years ago as part of a really broad restructuring and rebuilding of the entire HR function. So we brought in a new CHRO. He was tasked, the legacy model of HR was very much a personnel, administrative, reactive, all of the, stigmas we have with kind of that HR that we're trying to distance ourselves from. That was where we were. We brought in Jeff Perkins, our CHRO. He's on Twitter. If you all are live tweeting, his handle is It's Jeff Perkins. So if you want to say hi to him, feel free to wave. So he came in, and really he was tasked with rebuilding the whole HR function. NPR was really going through quite a bit of an evolution. We had a 42-year history as a radio broadcast organization, but we had really been evolving dramatically towards digital media content, and the organization that we are today is not the organization that we were 5 years ago. And to support that evolution, leadership understood that we needed an HR group that was nimble and strategic and proactive and all of the things that can really help propel the business forward. So he brought me in and had that responsibility over recruiting, and really it was a matter of, okay, we have to really just blow it all up. I was told this in the interview process. We have to blow it all up and rebuild it all. And I said that's equal parts, terrifying and awesome, because how often you get a chance as recruiting leaders. I think we're drawn to those kind of challenges, right? We want to be in an environment where we can make our own mark, and to do that in a place like NPR was something I couldn't pass up. So I quickly got in, and the way things were positioned to me were real. It was a complete rebuilding effort. We rolled the staff over. My first 6 months were spent really going through and doing all of the basic recruiting standard operating procedures. So picking a new ATS, overhauling all of our processes and procedures, getting the right people in place. We're a pretty lean organization, so if you look at NPR, we have about 850 staff members across the US, handful in overseas markets as well for our foreign bureaus. And we hire about 120 people per year. So our recruiting team is really lean. It's myself, we've got a senior recruiter, and a recruiting coordinator, and that's it. And we have, on average, about 30 open jobs at any given time. So it's not a high volume environment, but all of those 30 jobs are one-off, niche, highly specialized jobs. They're reporters, they're user experience architects, they're foreign correspondents with an expertise in Latin America. These are all fairly niche and unique positions. So when I sat down and once we got the basics in place, I had a lot of discussions throughout the team to kind of assess, okay, what do we do? When you look at our hiring, we had that history in broadcast, so when we're recruiting journalists, especially journalists in broadcast, they know who NPR is for the most part. So from an employer brand standpoint, we started at a great spot. Our challenge there is that we are a nonprofit, and when we're hiring, we're competing against the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, all these organizations that are for-profit. And so, there's that challenge. And then the other challenge for us was on the technical side, as we were really starting to scale our technical teams and digital roles, we didn't necessarily have the same brand cachet in those markets. Yet we were competing against Google and Facebook and Twitter, and we were also competing for talent that, in many cases tended to be younger, and younger generations don't always listen to radio. They didn't necessarily grow up with NPR. So it was a really unique position for us to kind of rebuild our brand and kind of proactively, I should say, build a brand perception in these markets. So again, for us, I kind of looked at that, I said, okay, social media is going to be a big part of how we're going to do this. So looking at NPR and social media today, this is a high-level view of kind of where we are from our account. So, this definitely is not reflective of all of our social media accounts, but, NPR News, you can see, is our largest account with 1.8 million followers. That's primarily an editorial platform. We have NPR, which is more of a marketing, comms, and branding channel. NPR Jobs, which is our recruiting account. I'll talk more about that in a bit. And then Facebook, Instagram, Foursquare, kind of all these things. You might look at something like Foursquare and say, okay, but this is recruiting, right? Are you going to give me a Pinterest and tell me that you're going to recruit great people on Foursquare? Foursquare, to me, I think has employer branding potential and possibilities. And to give you an example of a campaign that we did on Foursquare is, we know that we have fans that are loyal listeners to us, and they're in a local market, and they have their local call sign memorized. They know exactly, they have it saved. They can find NPR when they're in their car, they're in their home. But when they travel, they don't know where to find NPR. If they have the app, they can stream it, but otherwise they may not know where to find us. So we did a campaign on Foursquare where we left tips at all the major airports across the US, and said, welcome to Boston. Your local member station is WBUR. You can find them at such and such. Enjoy your trip. And that was something that was really simple. It took me maybe an hour and a half to do. But the amount of feedback we've gotten from that, is that going to allow us to hire somebody? Maybe not, but it's a positive touch point with our brand. And anytime you are able, as a recruiting or talent function, to enable people to have positive touch points with your brand, then that's a positive for you. So, brand ambassadors, what does that really mean? I think for us, when we kind of sat down and we developed what our talent strategy was going to be, we said, okay, here are our realities. Lean team, lean budget, lean resources, strong consumer brand, digitally inclined employees for the most part. People are a media company, that's a huge advantage, so people tend to be savvy about media and social media for that matter. And then we also have a huge loyal fan base. And so for us, I kind of said, those are really the ingredients of building a talent strategy that's heavily focused on activating our employees, engaging our fans, using different social channels to build buzz and awareness about the kind of things that we're doing, and ultimately help people get a sense of what it's like to work at NPR and the kind of people that we have. People knew our journalism, they knew our programming, they didn't necessarily know what it was like to work at NPR. And so we wanted to really create some authentic channels to get that messaging out to our staff and to our fans. So when you're building a social recruiting strategy in your organization, how many of you feel that you have a social recruiting strategy that's kind of up and running and humming? Okay, a couple hands. How many of you are trying to build it, but getting a ton of resistance from whoever within your organization? Okay, more hands. That's not uncommon. And honestly, I think anybody who is doing social recruiting has had to overcome that at some point. Social media, when you look at it as a function, there are different stakeholders in different organizations. So in some organizations, it's marketing. Some organizations, it's communication. Some organizations, it's PR. In no organizations is it HR, I'm guessing. And as I think many of you who are doing this, when you're dealing with marketing and PR and these people that are the key holders to social media, they don't always look at HR as a den of innovation. Sorry to say that, but I think in many organizations, when they say, what's the most innovative team you have? HR is typically not the first one that people are going to mention. That's okay, because you have an opportunity when you're doing this to really get them to buy into these ideas and to create that credibility as a TA leader or even as a recruiter for your entire HR team. So when you're really looking to build something, first thing you have to do is figure out who are the social media stakeholders in your organization. Without their buy-in, you're not going to get very far. So understand who those people are. And then another thing you want to do that tends to be successful, understand in your organization who are the social media, innovators, thought leaders, whatever, the kind of people who in your organization embrace social media. Chances are those people may be outside of HR, and you should proactively work to find people outside of HR that are champions, and really invest in those relationships. Because if you now have roots and you've got connections within your organization outside of HR that are supporting what you're trying to introduce, you now have that backing. And I think one thing that's really important to keep in mind is in many organizations, getting buy-in for social media is about relationships, and it's about credibility. And you may have a brilliant idea for a campaign, but if you don't have relationships with the people you're pitching it to, if you don't have credibility in their minds, then you're probably not going to get that far with it, because it's a brilliant idea, but the relationship isn't there to really foster it and push it through. So that's a really important part to launching social recruiting. You really want to invest in those relationships. Engaging your employees. Give them a microphone, not a muzzle. I think many organizations tend to be so risk-averse as it relates to social media. They're terrified of what can go wrong. They play out in their mind all of somebody's going to tweet that their day sucked. People are going to see it, and it's going to be bad. And you know what? People may do that from time to time, but let's work under the assumption that our employees are going to have the best interests. They're going to be adults. They're going to be smart about how they're using social media, instead of putting together policies and guidelines that completely restrict what they can and can't say. And then you end up having a really filtered, manicured messaging that comes out of social media, and candidates are not going to respond to that. They're going to know that it's manufactured. They're going to know that it's corporate approved, and it's not going to feel real and authentic to them. And one thing to keep in mind as well as you're doing this is that everyone is a brand ambassador. There's a lot of discussion in our kind of world right now about candidate experience. There should be. We need to take better care of our candidates. We need to understand that anybody who comes in to interview with us, their experience, good or bad, is a tweet away, is a Glassdoor post away. And if some organizations are really arrogant about their hiring, especially with the economy being down the way it was, it's a privilege to get an interview here. Well, you know what? If you have that kind of approach and you treat candidates that way, you're going to be creating some negative brand ambassadors out there in the marketplace, and that can do a lot of damage for you. So just keep that in mind, and really make sure that you've got programs in place that are built to have positive touch points with anybody you touch outside the organization. So I want to spend a few minutes breaking down some of the different channels that we're using right now. Twitter was really our first start in social recruiting. We launched that in July of 2011. It's grown to over 18,000 followers so far. And really, this is our primary recruiting channel. It's grown, or I should say primary social recruiting channel. It's grown to our 7th source of applicants. And it's also, I believe, and I'll come back to it in a slide later, it's our number 6 or so source of hire from a volume standpoint. We've invested a lot in Twitter. And there are a variety of things that you can do with Twitter. It's fairly low barriers to entry. We're a nonprofit, so almost everything I'm going to walk you through is free. Free is good. I understand and appreciate where everybody is from a budget standpoint. It's hard to get that capital investment. You will need to get it, because eventually as your social recruiting efforts mature and grow, there are some tools that you will need that will cost you money when it comes to tracking analytics and metrics. But when you're in the early stages and you're building, then free is easy. It's good. So one of the interesting things about Twitter for us is it also helps us connect with new audiences. From an employer branding standpoint, one of our goals is to really find the next generation of public radio listeners and supporters. And Twitter specifically helps us do that. 63% of our followers are under the age of 35. Hashtags. I'm a big fan of hashtags. Hashtags are great. They provide value in a lot of ways. I also have a cautionary tale in here that I'll share. So our biggest hashtag that we use is one called NPR Life. So you may have seen it. It's incorporated into Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I'll talk a bit more about NPR Life a little bit later in the presentation. But really, when we created NPR Life, it was originally me going to a Tiny Desk concert and taking a picture and tweeting it and be like, hey, look how cool we are. And then I quickly realized that 2 things. One, I can't be everywhere. I can't be all these different places. At that time, we're actually in 3 different buildings in DC. But 2, I'm the HR guy. People don't want to hear from me. They want to hear from the reporter and the editor and the web designer, and the attorney. They want to hear from the people doing the work that they themselves would be doing. So I approached our marketing team. I said, I've got this great idea. It's a hashtag campaign. It's called NPR Life. And what we're going to do is we're going to tell all our employees, hey, when you're tweeting and it's something about your experience working at NPR, use this hashtag, and we'll market and brand it. And I got a lot of blank stares. And we're going to do what? I was like, no, this will be great. And I quickly, I guess I read some of the body language from before, realized I wasn't going to win that room over with an enterprise launch out of the gate. So I used the word that's been very helpful for me and hopefully will be helpful for you, is pilot. Let me pilot it. We'll start small. I'll get a handful of people. If it works out, then we'll scale it. If not, whatever, we'll move on. So we piloted it, and that took us to the Iowa caucus last year during the election. And several of our reporters, Don Gagne, Ari Shapiro, and Lise Hugh, were all at different caucus sites in Iowa tweeting using the NPR Life hashtag. And so people started asking, hey, what is this NPR Life thing? And I was like, all right, cat's kind of out of the bag. I should send a tweet from NPR Jobs and say, hey, here's this thing we're working on. We're piloting it. And so I did the next morning. Just before noon that day, Peter Sagal, who's the host of Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, tweeted, it's before noon in Chicago, and I'm already half drunk off surplus car talk mugs, NPR Life. And so the tweet was hilarious. It went viral. It got retweeted over 100 times. And at that point, we evolved beyond the pilot. So again, hashtags are valuable. Pub Jobs is another example of a collaborative recruiting effort that we created in conjunction with all of public radio. So anytime anybody in public radio tweets a job, we put that hashtag on it, and then we all share each other's jobs and market and promote all of our recruiting and hiring opportunities. So we built a community around that. Ask NPR Intern is by Cautionary Tale. So hashtags are public. Anybody can see them. Anybody can use them. We had a campaign last year with we hire about 150 to 165 interns every year. And so we had a campaign where our current intern class hosted a 1-hour chat on Twitter saying, and we got a lot of our alumni to participate as well, saying, hey, if you're interested in career opportunities here, come, check it out, ask questions, we'll answer them. First half hour was great. So great it started trending on Twitter, which drew the attention of certain people of certain persuasions that wanted to see this go badly. And so the next half hour, we had about 30 people trolling that public chat and really harassing interns for the next 30 minutes. So cautionary tale, hashtags are public. And then Journo Job, this just gives you an example. When you're tweeting jobs, you can use job-specific hashtags to get your jobs in front of new audiences that don't necessarily follow your account. So why social? We were really fortunate in January that the Washington Post did a story on our use of social media in recruiting. And part of what they wanted to do is interview somebody that we hired through social media. And I thought this snippet, to me, really reflected all the reasons in a couple paragraphs as to why we need to be on social. So this person that we hired wasn't looking for a job, but they did follow that Pub Jobs hashtag that I mentioned, and they saw a job that we had in Boston. They'd interned with us years ago, so they're somewhat familiar with NPR, but knew we'd been going through some changes and weren't really familiar with our recent history. And so they found out about the job. Then they discovered the NPR Life hashtag. They went there, and they got a sense of what it's like to work at NPR from all of our employees' perspectives. And ultimately, they ended up getting a job and accepting it. And this is a person who we would have had no chance of reaching through job postings, through our career site, through a lot of the more traditional channels. She wasn't going there. She was in a great job. She wasn't looking for a job. She was on Twitter. That's how we got her. So quickly, the case study, you'll hear a lot about stats and metrics. You've got to be able to measure those in social media. You need to know what's working so you can do more of that, what's not so you can do less of that. This is just a quick case study. In fall of 2011, our internship application volume was low. So we were approaching the deadline. We decided to extend it with a single tweet and saying, hey, we extend the deadline 1 week. Please apply if you're interested. And that single tweet, we didn't announce it anywhere else. No emails, no career site language. It was retweeted 114 times, got almost 750,000 impressions, led to 140 new applicants and 15 new intern hires. So this is just the example of the power of a single tweet and what that can bring for you. So employer branding broadly, I talked about NPR Life. As recruiters, we're always trying to come up with compelling, recruitment marketing content and branding content. NPR Life and hashtag for me, we're resource thin. I don't have time or, frankly, the creativity to draft endless amounts of, hey, look at how awesome we are, blah, 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 blah. But with the NPR Life hashtag, our employees are generating that content. And so since we've launched it, we have over 6,000 tweets with that hashtag. We have over 1,000 photos on Instagram with that hashtag. So now as a recruitment leader, I can point people here. I can say, go to tagboard.com/NPR Life, and you're going to get an aggregate view of Instagrams, tweets, etc. from our staff. And that'll really help you see what it's like to work here. So LinkedIn, I won't spend a ton of time here because obviously I know this is a channel you're all familiar with. LinkedIn, the one thing I will mention is last year they rolled out some new employer branding capabilities for your site, being able to do organizational status updates. Take advantage of those. We've really seen the results of a lot more engagement on that channel as we've been pretty active. And I usually try to post on there maybe once or twice a week, so it's not a high volume, but it's enough to get people coming in, interacting. And LinkedIn is actually our #3 source channel. And we do that actually with 5 job slots. So for those of you who know LinkedIn, you have the garage slot style. You can take jobs in and out. We have 5, and we get that kind of traffic through 5. Another interesting thing they did is they rolled out last year their Talent Brand Index, which is a proprietary index they use that calculates how attractive an organization is essentially by the number of people who follow the organization, comment on posts, follow people that your employees, apply to your jobs, look at your jobs, all those things. And what I found really interesting, having that number without context, I didn't really know what that meant. I said 15, is that good or bad? I have no idea. And so I asked them to do a comparison against media, and for us, that actually ranked higher than New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, ABC, a lot of for-profit media organizations that we compete with. Facebook. So Facebook, again, huge potential. This is NPR page we have is actually something that we kind of manage jointly with our communications team. That's more of a PR and marketing channel. We don't do a lot of direct recruiting on there, but we do use Work4 to power our job board. And that actually has been really effective for us. It's our #8 source channel. And again, I think the Facebook, we're just starting to get into how Facebook can be used as a sourcing channel. I think there's a lot of potential there. I personally think it's a very strong branding channel. The sourcing channel, especially with graph search, if you have graph search, it's kind of a sourcer's dream, right? You can find and cut down, slice through so many layers of how you're looking for talent. Instagram, it's a visual medium. Visual is really powerful. So I mentioned the traffic we have with NPR Life on Instagram. Really, Instagram, I think, is a really powerful employment branding channel, especially when your employees are sharing what's going on. Hey, I'm in a meeting, I'm on site, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. It's a great way to share that experience. YouTube, as the video showed, second largest search engine. YouTube is great. As you can see, we don't have a whole lot of traffic on YouTube. I think YouTube is, high investment, high potential reward, but video is harder, right? Video takes a bit more time. If you want to have a good video, it takes a bit more effort. So we're not really resourced to be able to invest. I'd love to be able to invest more time in YouTube. We're just not there yet, and especially if you're just starting social recruiting, I wouldn't recommend YouTube as a starting point. I think, again, YouTube is not really a sourcing channel, but it's a great branding channel. Career site. So this is probably, this is a tool all of you hopefully have. And I think career sites present a really good opportunity for you to tell your brand story. And we actually, just last week, launched our new career site. Something I'm really excited about. I've been thinking about since I got there 2.5 years ago. We're a media company, so that gives us some advantages. We have a custom content publishing system that we use to actually power our career site. So if you go to npr.org/careers, you can check it out. It's fully responsive. So if you're on your mobile device, you can check it out. You'll have a good experience. If you're on your tablet, you can check it out. Again, you heard earlier in the conference how important mobile is. So whether you have an M site or you have a responsive site, you really want to make sure that you're giving applicants and visitors a positive experience on mobile. Blogs. That's another really powerful tool that you can use to extend your employment brand. So we have a variety of blogs at NPR. When we launched the new career site, we have a Careers at NPR blog that I'll be managing. That should be interesting and fun. But we have a lot of our teams have blogs. So if you look in the upper right corner, our news apps team, they're awesome. They blog all the time. They share stuff. They post jobs this way. You can go there and you can see pictures of people hanging out at a happy hour at someone's house. This is just someone's team. They do all open source development, so all of their code is shared on GitHub. They give their stuff away, and I think they're really building a strong cachet in the marketplace. Our interns have a blog. They have a Tumblr page. So again, low barriers to entry. If you can't get a blog built into your site, start a Tumblr. Tumblrs are super easy, and it's a great way to kind of extend content and do it in a platform that by nature is really viral. And our favorite iHeart, NPR pictures, George and Brad, we're a media company, so we often interview celebrities and thought leaders and et cetera. When they come in, they take a picture of that postcard, which I shamelessly put on my Facebook page, of course. And everybody's like, you have the coolest job. You hang out with George and Brad. I'm like, no, I don't. Like, they're out in Culver City at NPR West. I've never seen them. And my only geeky moment is we had, his name is escaped. We had a huge person come through, Elton John. We were interviewing him on one of our shows, and I got advance word that he was coming. So I was trying to play it cool and go down in our lobby and just kind of hang out like, no, knowing he's coming, but trying to be coy because I didn't want to be like some fanboy geek. And then he walks in, and I was just like, oh, cool, Elton John. I just saw him, like, yay. And I turn the corner and look outside, and like 50 of our colleagues were all sitting outside, much more shamelessly just waiting for him to walk up so they could see him enter the building. So that was fun. Job descriptions. Job descriptions are another great way to extend your employer brand. Job descriptions don't have to suck. They can be fun. They can be fun. They really can, I promise. Get creative with it. This is an infographic we created for a recruiting manager job that we hired. You really want to have it be in a voice. Whatever your employer brand messaging is, incorporate that in your job description. It doesn't have to be a sterile document. And collaboration, just quickly touching on this, when you're building your employer brand, you don't have to go it alone. You can collaborate with other organizations. An example here is NPR Twitter chat. We collaborated with the HR team at Twitter to co-host a 1-hour chat where we provided social media job search advice to job seekers. And that's now a quarterly event. It's opening us to Twitter's audience. It's opening Twitter up to NPR's audience so that you can look for collaborations like that. And again, here really are what brand ambassadors look like. They amplify your jobs. They help your jobs get in front of more people, helping you reach new audiences. They also drive engagement. They talk about your organization and what you're doing. Seize that. Interact with them. People, if they're having a conversation with you, if they're tweeting to you and it's a corporate account, they expect a response. If they don't get a response, they might be pissed, and that's going to be a negative experience. So you don't have to respond to every single tweet that comes, but people want to have, the lure of social media is people want to engage with your brand. Welcome that. And so here are just some quick results. Again, both from applicants and hire standpoint of the impact that social's had. These numbers are a little misleading, I think, because whether somebody, our application process, people self-identify how they got there. So if I'm, Joey Job Seeker, I might see a tweet from one of my employees sharing this job. I might then go to the career site and apply. I could put referral, I could put Twitter, or I could put career site. And we have no actual way of tracking this, so I'd expect those numbers are actually higher. So key takeaways, rapid fire, build relationships with your internal stakeholders, activate your employees, pilot, start small, scale. If it works, do more. If it doesn't, throw it away, do something different. And multi-channel branding. Look for the channels that are going to be the most important for your organization, and be sure to be listening to your fans and interacting with them. So with that, I know we have a few minutes left for questions.
Hi. You talked about giving your employees a microphone as opposed to a muzzle, and I'm wondering how that conversation went with legal, and if you had a conversation with legal, how that went.
I did. Legal by nature is cautious and skeptical, as they should be. That's their role. Part of it was really the relationship piece. I think by the time I went to roll out NPR Life, I knew that was one group I'd have to get to buy in and support what I was doing. So I invested a lot of time getting to know our general counsel, our assistant general counsel, our employment attorneys, and having them kind of buy into me and see that while this idea was ambitious, I wasn't going to be reckless with our brand, and that we were going to have the appropriate safeguards in place. Should something happen, we could deal with it. It was the relationship allowed me to make that happen, but I think for me it was something that I knew that I'd have to get their support to scale that, and so I really worked on kind of making sure they knew that I wasn't going to be reckless and I could be trusted.
Thank you, Lars. To build on that question and that answer, I was wondering, do you have someone on the team, or do you screen the postings on NPR Life before they go out?
No, every piece of content you see on NPR Life is real time. That's coming from the employees. There's no screening mechanism. Does that mean that every tweet is like, I love NPR, it's great? Like, no, there's some tweets that somebody had a bad day. And they're like, oh, God, really? 14 meetings in one day? That's inhuman. But part of it is, I think we're okay with the risk of that because it also portrays a more complete view of the work experience. Even Disneyland and Disney World has bad days, right? Nowhere is flawless. And so I think as long as it's not, I hate my coworker, I'm gonna, switch their sugar packet and I'll get them. Then I think it's okay. As long as there's nothing malicious. And unfortunately, we haven't had that issue yet.
Thanks, Lars. In terms of social media's leveraging towards candidates posting about interview process, have you been able to kind of wrap your head around how much information is out there relative to your interview process and how you're managing that on places like Glassdoor?
Yeah, it's interesting. I do check out Glassdoor because obviously I want to listen. It's important if you're active in social media that you're listening. I haven't seen any negative comments about our interview process, but one of the things that we actually did proactively when we rolled out our new career site is we have a section on the career site under the tab Applying that's called our Applicant Experience Pledge. And it lays out exactly what to expect from the moment you apply to a job to the point you do or don't get an offer. So that was really our way of getting ahead of that. I haven't seen any negative chatter. I think our process overall is pretty tight. But we said, look, we don't want there to be mystery. Let's just tell people exactly, this is exactly what you'll find. All right, thanks for letting me share.